pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure, actually, to be in this, because my first experience of suicide was as a teacher of criminal law and teaching young lawyers when we were dealing with criminal law the then reality, which is, okay, it was in the last century, but I'm not exactly Methuselah. At that time, at least only in the opinion of my children, but at that time, it gives you some idea, I think, of just what a big taboo and if almost untouched area this was. At that time, suicide and attempted suicide were regarded as very, very serious criminal offences, on a par with murder. And that gives us some idea of how difficult it was always going to be to penetrate and to probe all the many, many layers and levels of things we needed to penetrate and probe to really understand this issue well. That was at one level. Of course, at the level of reality, precisely because it was so difficult to probe and because a finding of suicide or attempted suicide, whether by a coroner or a court, was so difficult for families and so difficult to live with, of course, we ended up with a kind of a statistical mishmash, a world of great fiction around this issue. And so there are many, many issues that we now have been freed up or are increasingly freer now, like the layers of the onion, to peel away so that we can see more clearly what lies beneath this phenomenon. There are many things we know. We know particularly the role of alcohol and drugs, for example, the role of attitudes to homosexuality. These are two things that bear down particularly, I think, on our young people and that we really do urgently need to tackle. There are many, many others. We've been, on the one hand, fortunate, though I use that word in inverted commas, but we are in this way a fortunate generation in the sense that things that were regarded as taboo and secret and furtive and unexplored in the past around issues to do with child abuse, whether it's physical or sexual abuse, have now come to the surface in a huge avalanche and have been dealt with now. We've had a number of very, very serious and probative forensic reports that have opened up realities to us that we were either unaware of or only very, very, very vaguely aware of. And in particular, we know from the stories of those who experienced these things and experienced them in darkness and silence, the dreadful impact they had, not just on childhood, but on teenage life, on adulthood, on and over a lifetime. So we now have this information. It's desperate information to have, but it's important information to have, because these are the pieces that we begin to put together differently so that we construct a different kind of future. And part of creating that future now, that positive mental health culture, also involves the sphere of personal responsibility. We've had a lot of talk in recent times about institutional responsibility, but there is the issue of personal responsibility, involving an actively moving away from what I might call a dangerous or certainly a very troubling reluctance to openly acknowledge and seek appropriate help when we experience serious mental distress or when we live inside the circumstances that are contributing to that mental stress, whether it's bullying in school, whether it's cyberbullying, whether it is worrying about, as young people grow up, they're worrying about their sexuality in a world that is still uncomfortable, and maybe particularly for them, sending out mixed messages about homosexuality as one example. And so these are very, very important they're issues for us as individuals, as parents, as educators, as those who are involved in the field of support services, whether it's that huge spectrum of support services that are gathered now under this roof. The Sea Change National Stigma Reduction Campaign, I'm hoping, and I know many of you are hoping, will go a very long way to opening up discussion around family tables and in workplaces and wherever two or more are gathered, to encourage, or rather to discourage, reluctance around these issues and to open up a new willingness, a new openness to make people more comfortable around discussing these things openly, without fear. More than that, I have to say, I really look forward to the growth of a culture that is capable, that is intuitively sensitive and capable of recognising and confidently addressing the kind of signs and signals that those who are in mental distress, those who are under these pressures that can lead to suicide, so that these things can be identified. They can be identified early on. They can be tackled. We can help to put coping strategies in place. We can help to alert responsible authorities, agencies or support services, so that we make the individual mental well-being of the one atomised human person a communal responsibility, our responsibility as family, friends, colleague, community. Mental ill health and suicide, they have been with us in good times and they have been with us in bad. But there is no doubt that these difficult economic times, they increase the strain and stress. The lived lives of families are under increased stress and strain as unemployment and worry and indebtedness take a very long toll. They make it all the more imperative that conference like this is seen to address these issues so openly and relatively comfortably, unafraid to deal with them, not trying to hide them in spaces or in dark areas where they are talked about in whispers, but rather openly to acknowledge that these things happen in the normal course of life. And it's all the more imperative that we do, and we are seen to do, everything we can to reduce the suicide rate, to reduce this unnecessary waste of human life, reduce the awful legacy of grief for the bereaved, and importantly, reduce the awful suffering and grief, the overwhelming misery of a life that feels compelled to contemplate suicide or to take that step. The truth is, we now have more initiatives, more supports than at any time in the past. And that has to be a source of some reassurance and comfort as we open up this issue and let the issue drive these organisations to new levels and higher levels of intelligent, effective intervention. We have a growing public awareness that suicide prevention and reduction requires a concerted and importantly an integrated effort from all groups in society, whether it's service providers, service users, communities, schools, colleges, clubs, workplaces, families and friends. It's going to take a joined up effort where embedded attitudes or behaviours conduce to the kind of anxieties or stresses that can accumulate, and in accumulating or accreting inside the human heart and soul that lead to that isolation and thoughts of suicide behaviour here. It's more than a curiosity. It's more than an intellectual curiosity. It's an emotional passion for those in this room to probe that why and how, so that every time you probe it, you reduce its size and scale. You know more about it. You have more control over it. That's why you gather here. And that's why you have a packed programme with expert speakers drawn from the words of medicine, politics, science, academia, the world of the spirit as well. It's great to see Father Aidan here. I haven't seen Father Aidan for a while. It's great to see so many people willing to contribute to this issue, drawing out of the depths of their experience, because everybody here has an experience that is both unique but necessary to be put on the table so that we get the full jigsaw puzzle, not just little tantalising pieces, but that we get the full jigsaw puzzle put together, the full picture. And this room holds quite an array of expertise, wisdom and insight into this harrowing human phenomenon. And I really want to say to those who are sitting in the room, sometimes it's easy to be overwhelmed by the professionals. And I think the professionals, particularly in suicide prevention, would be the first to say to each of you that what you hold in your pocket, if you're not a professional in this sphere, but someone who's passionately interested perhaps because of a personal experience, your piece of information is gold to them. It is the gold nugget information of research, so do not be in the least bit inhibited about putting your piece of the jigsaw puzzle on the table. It's such an... I'm very grateful to each one of you for making this subject your business and your responsibility. You didn't have to be here. You didn't have to be here. There are many other things you could be doing with your life, because this is a distressing issue to be involved in. And for many of the families who are bereaved, and I know many of the people here today, I know them of old, who have been deeply, deeply hurt in their lives by bereavement, and yet still come, still get involved, still help to build a society where others will not have to live with the grief that they live with day in and day out. And I'm very grateful that there are people who do not run away from this issue, but face into it with such courage. I'm very grateful for people who make it their professional business. There are many, many other options. There are many things that would not just be as draining, that would not just be as saddening, but still there are people who make this work their mission, and they do it precisely because they want to make the world a better place and a happier place, to reduce the grief and the sadness. So to be able to insert a determined and a very hard-headed hope into our national narrative on suicide, that's what you are doing. And it's essential if we're going to change that narrative. And we are changing it, but we have to change it. I see when we take the longer view, the longer range view, I see a huge change in the narrative already, but I see chapters to be written that we would all welcome. What doesn't end through all of this, and it's so evident in this room, I think this is when I see the faces of those who have been through the ordeal, what obviously doesn't end and what impels people to keep with this issue is the love for that life that is lost, for that man, that woman, that boy, girl, husband, wife, son, daughter, friend or colleague, the person who became overwhelmed in a moment in their lives and took that step into death. That love endures. It seems to me it is that love, and it is the love of parents who are worried where children self-harm or engage in this conduct. It is the love of these people. It is the love that keeps this organisation so focused on the need that lies behind what you're addressing here today. It's a love that endures because it is a loss that endures. And that's what generates and will keep on generating momentum behind Console, behind this conference, behind our collective determination to get to grips with suicide prevention and postvention, comprehensively, effectively, to keep on searching until we get those answers, until we get the results that give us comfort, that reduce the grief. Is ítach ar fad an obair atá seola goibh agus gur a míle maithagah as ocht an obair seo. Tá sé just co-tábhachta agus is sibse na léacra. You are the champions. You are the people who are changing the narrative. Gur míle maithagah.